Welcome to Natural Born Talents. Today's subject is a continuation of the secrets of the angels. Today I'll be focusing on how to spot satanic cults, how to spot when Satan's around, and how to spot people who are pretending to be good by playing on the other side, the moralistic side, versus the decadence of Satan. And normally I don't use real people in life on my videos, and I don't use politics. But in this case I'm going to make an exception so I can show you an example. And also because I see the ugly pattern rearing its ugly head again within the present politics in the United States. So having said that, let's take a look at the worst antagonist, Satan.
I hate that guy.
Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video about the workings of this particular devil, but I will give you an example that emphasizes the struggle between good versus evil. And what better subject to take than one of Satan's most infamous followers, Charles Manson. Now, looking at Charles Manson's case, this is exactly the kind of example you could look at to see how this game works. It has cults, crime, courtroom, drama, everything that exemplifies the cases between decadence and moralism. So this video is going to be more about the view from the angels and Satan than the details you may find on other videos within the internet. And watching those videos, I could see Satan talking right through Charles Manson, especially when he was in the courtroom. So this video is going to be focusing on the patterns within this game. This is so you can recognize the psychological patterns that Satan and the moralistic angels play in order to avoid getting caught in this game. And again, I'll point out that Satan plays off of moralism and vice versa. They know each other, they work with each other, but they're playing on both sides to make a point. And Charles Manson's case is probably one of the best cases I've seen that represent this game back in the 60s and 70s, but now we're seeing it resurface again on a larger scale. Now, like I said, I don't know all the details, but from what I do know, Charles Manson, as a young boy, had a lot of trouble with his mother because his mother was an alcoholic and abusive. It is likely she had some sort of connection with Satan in some way and form. And Charles Manson was probably being groomed by Satan at a very early age. But having said that, as he went through life and his mother influenced him in crime, they started to put him into reform schools. Now, reform schools tend to be on the very moralistic side of things, trying to correct his behavior. Now, somebody who is connected to Satan is, of course, going to reject that pretty much outright. Now, it's likely that as a child, Charles Manson was just wanting to be loved by his mother, not realizing that anyone connected to Satan is not going to receive love. When you have such an abusive parent, more likely than not, you're going to be corrupted by that parent. And the reason for that is deep in their subconscious. The parent has actually made a deal with Satan in order to destroy you. And what the child needs to figure out, but seldom does, is that their parent is corrupt and they need to leave them to something better. But as in Charles Manson's case, it just went the other way. Which some could argue that maybe if Charles Manson had loving parents, he wouldn't have gone down the route he did. Probably so, to some degree. But others could argue that he was born to play the game that he played. I don't have the detail on that, but I could guess. In any case, as he got older and stronger, it was obvious that he had that charm that Satan is so very good at using and manipulating people with, that charisma. And many of you probably know, Charles Manson started a cult. And a lot of his followers had that same glassy-eyed look, along with the ego, we can get away with anything kind of attitude. But inside, they're building up all the rage and violence that Satan could dish out. And how cults work is detailed more in the Satan contract. So here Satan grooms Charles Manson over the years, gets his cult followers to follow the same ego or the same will. And of course, who do they target? They target people who have prestigious lives, people who may be moralists, and so on. And it is not surprising that Sharon Tate was targeted, especially if you look at one of her movies, The Eye of the Devil. Now, I know Satan, and I know he probably targeted her for a variety of reasons, but The Eye of the Devil was certainly one of them, and was likely an offhand warning. Now, I'm not here to condemn anyone, especially Charles Manson's followers, because I know Satan can manipulate people to do just about anything. He's very hard to fight. And I know that some of his followers regret very much what they've done. And I know when some of them will have another life in another time, they will never go back to such a game ever again. Though some of the members may be in the inferno forever, some of them were likely just pulled into the game for one reason or another, which is typical in many cults. I've seen a lot of people who are guilty who get away with it because they're moralists. You can't spot them, but they were behind the whole game. I've seen other people who were pulled in it just because somebody wanted to get them involved in something horrendous, and they really didn't want anything to do with it. But then, of course, there are the ones who are truly evil and would murder anyone without batting an eye. And in many of my videos, I say there's a price to pay, and this is what I'm talking about. Now, Satan and the moralists and the like have their games, but there's always a price to pay. You have your fun, but later there's nothing but hell. And the hell differs from person to person depending upon their crime, their will, their influence, their strength, on many, many things. So in regards to anybody who's connected to this incident, the Charles Manson family and incident, I'm not here to attack or condemn any of you. It's just Satan's game, and it's part of the moralistic world that we live in. Whatever part you played in it, whatever you willed, the real judgment is always made on the other side. It's never made down here in this world, because we have a lot of people who are moralistic to the point that they'll condemn anything, including themselves. In fact, this particular incident actually gives a great example of something for others to avoid, to something to learn from, to something to move on from. While that may be one of the greatest sacrifices to be made, it's still something to be heeded. Now, having said that, the reason I'm pointing that out is because that example is repeating itself in many political factions at this time. More on that later. This is why I often remind people, don't be so quick to judge. You have to see the whole picture and the details at the same time to come to a conclusion. There are many, many, many factors within the Satan moralistic game that influence the outcome one way or another. Now let's take a look on how to recognize the patterns of the Satan moralistic games. The first thing, obviously, to look for is insanity, stupidity, consistent lying, narratives and brainwashing, bad leaders, the lack of communication. This is particularly when you try to talk to someone who's a sycophant to the Satan game. You can't talk to them. They won't listen to you. They'll come back only with their narrative, not the truth. They will always be holier than thou and say things we're doing good for humanity when they're doing the opposite. People start dying who didn't need to die. The lack of compassion for those who did fall. The prevalence of riots and violence. Censorship. The cover-up of such said riots and violence. People wearing unusual fashion, usually on the vulgar side. And this is nothing against fashion itself. Fashion is a fun game to play. I meant the dirty, dark side of fashion. where it seems somehow out of place. Increased sycophants to narratives, division within a country, within a family, within an organization, among friends. Now, on a personal level, if you're caught in this game, you'll get your little hints. Let's say your neighbor shows up with a car with a driver license 666. You go to the store and buy something and it comes out to exactly 666. Well, that probably tells you that Satan's nearby, or some of his sycophants are. In fact, Satan uses a lot of historically religious symbols, such as the pentagram inverted, the cross inverted, and the swastika altered, to suit his needs. The original meaning of such said symbols originally were used for religious practices that were good, that helped humanity. Now, Satan has always used these to represent himself, to pull people away from such healthy practices to his dark and decadent practices. When you reached this point, it is likely something disastrous will happen, whether it's on a large scale or small scale. And this is the time to heed your warnings. Sometimes your ancestral spirits will pull you out of the game because they know you don't need to go through it. But I wouldn't rely on that. Now, some people who are caught in this game won't want out because they're getting something out of it. And they'll be very hard to convince to get out. In my experience, I would say not try. Let them figure it out themselves. Like I said before, there's always a price to pay. But on the other hand, they can be very invasive in other people's lives, and this is what the real problem is. When it gets to the government level, it means that there's going to be one huge power coming down on everyone, and it will be very difficult to stay out of or avoid. And at this time, it's likely you might want to get your friends together and do something about it in a very peaceful and helpful way. If you do it in a violent way or anything destructive, you'll just be pulling right into their game, and that's what they always hook. The people who cause violence, the people who hook violence, are all on the side of Satan and the moralistic angels, the fallen ones. And they want you to do what they're doing so they can condemn you. This is why projection or displacer is so prevalent these days. Everybody who is falling or being played by Satan or the fallen moralistic angels are playing these games. Now again, a lot of you will be asking, why do people play this? Why would people go for insanity? Again, the reason is because they're getting something out of it. They're getting attention. They're getting their narcissistic needs met. Some are getting money. Some think it's cool and they can relate to other people who think so too, and so on and so forth. But as you can see in the Charles Manson case, it usually doesn't end well. And that's the lesson that is so hard for many people to learn. And again, I've tried to teach people, but you can't. They got to figure it out themselves. So again, these videos are about awareness, just being aware of the people around you and the darkness that is behind some of these people. Now, Satan can play on either side, left or right. It doesn't matter. But if you watch carefully, you can tell which side he's playing, because of the personality disorders I just mentioned. And what does this have to do with Charles Manson? Well, again, it's the very same game. Charles Manson was just the tool of Satan. He used Manson. But I think Manson figured that out and allowed it in his will and his psyche. But he wasn't the only one playing it. There were also the moralists behind it. They were the followers who got caught in it. And unfortunately, at that time, there were a lot of people who were moving away from the decadent moralist games through the hippie movement. And they were looking for peace, love, and understanding, not realizing that sometimes they were pulled into one side or the other. And because of Manson, I think Satan knew this, that he had used Manson to discredit the hippie movement, to pull it down, to say it's decadent, and so the moralists could condemn it. Satan, again, works with the moralists and vice versa. They're two sides of the same coin, the game of duality. Now, I will remind everybody who's caught in this game on one side or the other, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're all guilty, that you're all Satanists or extreme moralists. It just means that you're struggling between these two forces. The key is not to succumb to them, to be aware of them so you can move forward from them. If the angels feel that the society hasn't moved far enough away from them, they'll pull the trigger. And that usually means something horrible will happen. And as we see throughout history, a lot of the tyrannical politicians get into power. They're almost always Satanists. And when they do, as I mentioned earlier about their personality traits, they think that they're gods. They think that they're above it all. And they think their decisions on killing other people are just. If these people get into power, you will see more death. You will see more destruction. You will see more chaos. And again, the things to watch out for are things like your freedom doesn't matter. Do what I tell you to do for the good of everyone, when behind the lines they're not doing anything. The hypocrisy. The consistent lying and patting yourself on the back for doing things that are quite disastrous or cause death to others. Again, these people don't think about anything but themselves and disregard life as though it was just part of the game when someone dies, whether it's on a small scale or large scale. So I think if you look at today's society, we're getting our hints. And since this movement, as of late, within the societies throughout the world are on a large scale, it looks like there may be trouble ahead. Can it be averted? Yes, it can, with enough love, enough patience, enough understanding, and enough awareness. So I guess if there's anything you should take away from this is be careful of bearded people with glassy eyes, you know, the ones that look like Rasputin and have somewhat of a cult following to them. They may just censor you or something worse. So I hope you... There we are. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments section below. Presently, I am doing aura readings, so if you are interested in that, please look for the link in the description below. In the next video, I'll be talking about the good angels, the angels that really care for humanity, that love to nurture humanity, the ones connected to the various religions connected to angels throughout the world. Thank you again. Hope to see you on the next video.